What's up guys, Sagi here and welcome to another Tech Gear Talk. Today I'm going to compare the Sony a61, 64, and 6600 and see if I can help you pick which one would work best for you and what you need. When you first look at these three models, they look pretty similar, both aesthetically and in terms of performance. But there are some critical differences between the three that you need to know about before you choose so you don't waste your money. I'm going to talk about the strengths and the weaknesses of all three cameras when it comes to photography and video. And my goal with every camera comparison is to give you a detailed overview of the cameras and compare them in a way that relates to real life use. I will go over some of the important specs of these cameras, but I'm going to focus on sharing my actual user experience with you. I have the video broken down into chapters in the description in case you want to skip around or you're interested in one specific section. If you watch the whole video, you'll see that Sony actually removed some of the features from the flagship a6600, even though these features are available in the lower end models. All right, so let's get to the comparison. I want to mention that at the time I'm making this video, the a6100 sells for $598, the a6400 sells for $798, and the a6600 sells for $1,198, which is significantly more. That's why it's important to me that you understand the differences. If you're going to spend twice as much money, I want it to be because you know what you're getting and you know that you need it. So let's get started by quickly talking about the sensor, processor, and performance. All three cameras use the same 24 megapixel APS-C CMOS sensor and the Bions X processor. So in general, it's unlikely that you'll notice marked differences in terms of image quality. This combination of sensor and processor on all three cameras produced outstanding images and videos for me. I'll include tons of samples in this comparison, and if you want to see even more for any particular model, I'll include links to the dedicated reviews in the description. Now, in addition to very good image quality, startup time and general menu operations are very fast for these cameras, and they all felt very responsive when changing settings and when switching between modes. Now, because of how I shoot, one of the features that I look at with every camera that I get is continuous or burst shooting. You can just point the camera at the subject, hold down the shutter, and the camera will just keep firing. Now, this is a nice feature if you're photographing sports, pets, kids running around, or any fast-moving subjects. And there are two things you want to consider here. First, how many frames per second the camera can shoot, and second, how many images can the buffer hold? Because if it gets full, the camera can't continue to shoot at full speed. Now, of course, the more frames you have per second, the more exposures you'll have to pick from later on. Now, all three cameras can shoot at up to 11 frames per second in burst mode with the mechanical shutter, or 8 frames per second using the electronic shutter, so there's no difference there. When we look at buffer memory, we see that the a6100 is rated for 77 JPEG and 33 RAW files, while the a64 and a6600 are rated for 115 JPEGs and 46 RAW images, which is a big step up. Now, it's important for me that when we look at any feature or function in this comparison, that you take a moment to consider how you actually plan on using the camera. And when we see advantages in one camera or another, that you take into account whether it will actually matter to you. In this case, when we look at 115 JPEGs versus 77, that seems like a big advantage for the a64 and a6600. But do you ever actually shoot 77 continuous frames? And will this actually matter to you? And there's no right answer here. It has to do with what and how you shoot and whether this advantage is meaningful enough for you to spend the extra cash. Now, before I move on to the next section, if you like what you've seen so far, let me know by giving this video a thumbs up. It helps me know what kind of content you like so I can make more of it. If you're in any groups or forums and you think this video would be helpful to other members, go ahead and share it. And if it's your first time here, hit the subscribe and notification buttons so you can stay up to date on all the latest gear and tutorials. But moving on, one of the most important things for me with any tool that I use is ergonomics in terms of both handling and user experience. As far as size and form factor, the three cameras are quite similar. The a61 and a6400 are virtually identical, and the a6600 is deeper and about 100 grams heavier due to the larger grip and the in-body image stabilization, which I'll get to later on. Now, from a handling standpoint, the larger grip on the a6600 is definitely noticeable, and the camera is more comfortable to use and hold for longer periods of time. And this is even more noticeable when we're using larger lenses. Now, another noteworthy difference about the body is that the a64 and a6600 have a magnesium alloy body with weather-sealed buttons and dials, whereas the a6100 has a plastic body with no weather sealing. So if you plan on using these cameras in conditions that may involve moisture or a lot of dust, one of the higher end models will be a better option for you. As I mentioned, this larger grip on the a6600 accommodates the newer and more powerful NP-FC 100 battery versus the a61 and 6400 that use the NP-FW 50 battery. So we're looking at a rating of about 810 shots on the a6600 versus 410 shots on the a6400 and 420 shots on the a6100. So that's almost twice as many shots on a single charge. And I think the slight advantage on the a6100 over the a6400 might have to do with the EVF quality, which I'll get to in a minute. Now, when it comes to video, we're seeing about 140 to 150 minutes of recording on the a6600 versus 70 to 75 minutes on the a64 and the a6100. So once again, a significant improvement. All three cameras do not come with battery chargers, but the battery can be charged in camera using a micro USB. Sony, it's 2020, it's time to switch to USB-C. But let's move on. All three cameras also allow you to use the camera while they're being charged, which is a really nice feature. Now, if you end up getting additional batteries for all three of these, you'll want to pick up an external battery charger so that you can charge those batteries while you're using the camera. All right, so now let's move on to buttons and dials. I think that if you're buying a camera and you're just using it with the factory settings, you're really missing out. Part of what you get when you're buying a higher end camera is the ability to customize it to work better for how you shoot. Now, all three cameras use the top dial and the control wheel on the back for aperture and shutter speed. But the a61 and a6400 have two custom buttons that you can program, while the a6600 has 4 of them. Now, the advantage of these additional buttons is that you don't need to go into the main menu or the function menu in order to get access to your most used features. That also means that I can set up the a6600 the exact same way that I set up my a7 III. And if that's something that you're interested in, I'll link to a video up in the corner and in the description. One other difference on the back is that the a64 and a6600 also have an autofocus, manual focus, and auto exposure lock toggles, while the a6100 only has an auto exposure lock button. Moving on to the top of the cameras, the mode dials on the a61 and a6400 have the same features, but the a6600 adds a memory 2 slot at the cost of the sweep panorama mode. It's a bit strange, but it looks like Sony removed the panorama feature from the flagship model, even though it's available in the 2 lower end models. You'll also notice that there is no built-in flash on the a6600, where once again the a61 and a6400 do have one. And I know from comments in my detailed reviews that this is something that some of you were frustrated by. One interesting feature in the a64 and 6600 is auto white balance lock, which allows you to keep the same auto white balance setting when you're shooting in burst mode. That means that if you hold the shutter down and you take 10 shots, they will all have the same white balance, which will give you more consistent results and will be easier to edit. This feature is not available on the entry-level a6100. Now, the a64 and a6600 also have a higher shutter lifetime with a rating of 200,000 actuations versus 100,000 on the a6100. And the last thing when it comes to the shutters is that the a6600 has a larger button, which is more comfortable to use. Now, that may seem like a small thing, but I really do like it better. Now, the last item I want to talk about when it comes to the body design is the EVF, or electronic viewfinder. The a64 and a6600 have a higher end 2.36 million dot EVF, and the a6100 has an entry-level 1.44 million dot EVF. The a64 and 6600 viewfinders can also be used with higher frame rates of 100 or 120 frames per second, which will lower the resolution of the viewfinders but will display movement more smoothly, which is a nice feature. Next, I want to talk about resolution, frame rates, and image quality. For photography, all three cameras offer a 6000 by 4000 pixel resolution and can shoot in both JPEG and RAW, so you can decide just how much information you want to capture depending on what you plan on doing with these images in post-production. I was extremely happy with the images that I got from all three cameras, and it would be essentially impossible for you to tell the difference. The images were crisp, sharp, and had excellent dynamic range. One difference that I wanted to point out is that while all three cameras have an ISO range of 100 to 32,000, the a6100 extends to 51,200, while the a64 and a6600 extend to 102,400. So it is possible that we could see some slight improvement in terms of ISO performance, or what some people call low light performance. In my experience, all three did a fantastic job in low light, and of course I compare them with fast lenses like the Sigma 1630 and 56mm when I need additional light. For video, all three can record 4K at 24 and 30 frames per second, and Full HD or 1080p at 24, 30, 60, and 120 frames per second. I do want to mention that 4K 30 has a 1.2x crop on all three of these, so we're losing a little bit of the frame. Now 4K footage from all three is sharp and detailed because we're getting full sensor readout and all three downsample from 6K. We also get great slow motion in 1080p when we're shooting at 120 frames per second with autofocus, which is one of the features that made me get Sony cameras to begin with. All three also offer a video option called SNQ, which, if you're not familiar with, allows you to select frame rates ranging from 1 frame per second all the way up to 120 frames per second. The camera will then either slow down or speed up the footage to 24, 30, or 60 frames per second. So if you're using SNQ 120 frames per second and you watch the clip in the camera or on your computer, it's already slowed down versus shooting regular 1080p 120 frames per second, which you will need to slow down in your video editor. Next, let's talk about time-lapse. All three offer interval shooting, which lets you have full control over your time-lapse. You can drag your shutter and you can get the exact results that you want. Once you're done shooting, you'll need to take those individual photos and then compile a time-lapse video using software. Now moving on to live streaming, again, all three cameras offer a clean HDMI option, so you can easily live stream with continuous autofocus and get amazing sharp video that's always in focus. Another great thing is that all three cameras do not have a 30-minute recording limit for video. This allows for continuous shooting for longer clips and removes the hassle of having to keep track of the length of the current clip so you don't accidentally reach the 30-minute mark and have your camera automatically stop recording. This can be super useful if you shoot very long videos or events and you don't want to record externally. Now personally, I got the a6400 first, so I was already used to having no limit. And I expect the same on the a6600, but I think that having this feature on the a6100 makes it possibly the best budget mirrorless camera for live streaming. Now the last thing I wanted to mention when it comes to video options is a very important distinction. It has to do with picture profiles. The a64 and a6600 offer options like S-Log2, S-Log3, and HLG, which allow you to record with the full dynamic range of the sensor and capture more details in the shadows and the highlights. This is particularly important when you're shooting in conditions where there's a significant discrepancy between the brightest and the darkest parts of your scene. It's great to be able to have more flexibility in capturing detail and then playing around with color correcting and color grading in post to get the exact look that you want. All right, so here's how I break it down. If you don't plan on doing any color correcting or color grading and you want to just take the footage out of the camera and use it, the a6100 will work great. If on the other hand you think that you may now or in the future want to experiment with correcting and grading, then I would opt for the a64 or a6600. All right, next let's talk about autofocus, where we'll see a lot of similarities and one major difference. All three have amazing autofocus with 425 phase and 425 contrast detection points, which cover about 84% of the sensor. For photography, the autofocus is as fast and accurate as in any camera that I've ever used, and the tracking is excellent. All three offer possibly the best eye autofocus on the market, and I absolutely love it when I'm shooting portraits because I don't have to worry about getting the focus point exactly on the subject's eye, and I can just concentrate on framing. And all three can track eyes even when the subject is far away from the camera, and if eyes are not detected, they'll revert back to face tracking. All three also offer animal eye autofocus, which is really important to me because I take a lot of photos of my dogs, and traditional zone autofocus options would focus on their nose because it's closer to the camera. When looking at autofocus for photography, the a6600 costs $1,200, so I expect this type of performance. But the a6100 is $600 and we're getting the same incredible autofocus. For video, all three have face tracking, which works really well. And I didn't experience any of the type of hunting that I sometimes got from the a6000, 6300, and 6500. All three also offer subject tracking, which can be activated using the touchscreen. Now, one significant advantage of the a6600 is that it uses the same impressive eye autofocus technology for video. So in addition to face detection, we're getting real-time eye autofocus like what we see on the a7R4 and the RX100 Mark VII. And it's always nice to have that extra level of accuracy. Next, one of the major upgrades to the a6600 is that it offers IBIS, or in-body image stabilization. This sensor shifting 5-axis stabilization is rated for up to 5 stops, which is pretty significant. It will allow you to shoot photos handheld at slower shutter speed than you're used to, and it will help eliminate some of that camera movement. When you use lenses with OSS, or optical steady shot, then the system uses 2-axis stabilization from the lens plus 3 of its own to get even more accurate results. Now this of course brings up the price of the camera, but it offers some great versatility. The way I look at it, I'm only paying for image stabilization once, and then I can use some less expensive lenses that don't offer stabilization and still get more stable results. So like I mentioned before, I can use the super affordable primes from Sigma which don't have stabilization and then count on the a6600 to take care of that. Now I always think it's important to mention that while IBIS will help with handheld video footage, if you truly want stable video footage from a mirrorless camera, you'll want to use a gimbal. Right now, my favorite one to use with these three is the Zhiyun Webuilt S, and I'll link to a review that I did for it in case you're interested. If you want something a little bit smaller, Zhiyun also makes the M2, which will definitely work with the 16 to 50 kit lens, as well as something like the Sigma 16mm f1.4. Moving on, let's talk a little bit about the screen. So all three have the same 2.4 million dot tilting LCD screen, which can be tilted up for when you're shooting from the hip or when the camera is positioned low on the ground. It can also be tilted down for when the camera is above your head, like if it's on a tall tripod or if you're shooting over a group of people. And then finally, the screens can also be flipped 180 degrees to face the front for when you're shooting video and you're in front of the camera, or for shooting selfies. Now, all three of these cameras run into an issue when you're trying to mount an external microphone on the hot shoe, and then you try to flip the screen to face the front because the microphone blocks the screen. So if you plan on using an external shotgun microphone, pick up an L bracket or a cage that gives you additional mounting options. You can also use something like the Rode Wireless Go and then clip it to the monitor or hinge mechanism. And that transitions us well because the next set of features that I want to bring up have to do with audio. As I mentioned, all three of these have an external mic input, so you can use an external microphone to get excellent audio right into the camera. If you want to hear audio samples from each camera with the built-in microphone and an external microphone, check out the audio section for each detailed review. With all three cameras, the audio levels are always displayed on the LCD when you're in movie mode. So as you're preparing to record or even while you're recording, you can see the levels. You can also modify the audio levels during the recording, which is great. Now, one major advantage of the a6600 is that in addition to a mic input, you also get a headphone jack. Now this lets you easily monitor audio while you're recording, and it's extremely helpful in identifying problems before and during recording. If at all possible, you should always try to monitor your audio because it's easier to notice that you can hear a fan from the other room and then go turn it off than to have to remove the fan noise from every clip in post-production. Of course, you can use an external preamp like the Beachtech Micro Pro, which is amazing and gives you the ability to monitor audio with any camera. but recording straight into the camera, I'm giving the a6600 the edge. Okay, so we talked about a lot in this video, and I think all three cameras are impressive, so let's see if we can choose the best option for you. The a6100 is of course the most budget-friendly model at $598. It gives us fantastic image quality, great autofocus, the same video frame rate and resolution options, unlimited recording, and a clean HDMI output at the cost of a plastic body, a lower resolution EVF, no picture profiles, and lack of moisture and dust resistance. The a6400, which I've owned since its release, gives us all the features of the a6100, plus a magnesium alloy body, moisture and dust resistance, a higher resolution EVF, excellent dynamic range with picture profiles, double the shutter actuation lifetime, and a couple of extra buttons and features for only $200 more. And finally, the a6600 adds 5-axis in-body image stabilization, a deeper and more comfortable grip, a larger battery with almost twice the rating, real-time eye autofocus for video, and a headphone jack for monitoring audio, all for $400 more than the a6400, or twice the price of the a6100. And don't forget, we also lose the built-in flash and the panorama mode. So which camera is a better value and which one should you get? I think that depends on your priorities and what you plan on doing with it. I always say that you can't have everything in any camera, so it comes down to what's important to you. I do my best to answer every comment, and I'm happy to continue the conversation with you in the comment section if you have any questions or need help choosing. I'll put links in the description to where you can get all three cameras, as well as some popular kits and accessories. And whenever there are holiday specials and discounts, the links will always be updated with the lowest pricing. If you end up ordering anything using those links, you can help support my channel for free and help me create more content for you, so thank you in advance. And I'll also have links in the description to the more detailed video about each camera if you want a more in-depth review. I really hope I was able to give you a good comparison between the Sony a61, 64, and 6600. And I would love to hear in the comment section which option is best for you. If this video was helpful, please let me know by giving this video a thumbs up, tweet it, share it, and if you're interested in more camera reviews and tutorials, join the community by hitting the subscribe and notification buttons. You can always find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Tech Gear Talk. You know what I always say, buy it nice or buy it twice. Good luck and see you soon. I really hope I was able to give you a good comparison between, the exact same way that I set up my 10 shots. So all three have this, let me bite my lip while I try to speak. It's been a challenging one. You think this video would be helpful to others? I think this, so that's almost twice as many, that's hard. Yeah, I'm gonna totally mess that up. I'm gonna have to do that a couple times, at least. Now the a6400 also fail again, which will lower the resolution of the, Do I pair them up with fast? The a60, now I just can't do it at all. All right, come on. Ready.